All right, so in this video and in the following videos, I'm going to show you transformations of the square root of x. So we're going to do transformations of the square root of x. All right, so let's start with example 1. So say, for example, I start with my parent function, which is f of x is equal to the square root of x, and then I transform it to g of x, and this is going to equal to 2, so x plus 3 minus 4. So the first question you should probably be asking is, what transformations have I done to the original function f of x in order to get g? Well, our clues are right here. Since it's the parent function, it's the simplest functions, we can literally actually take a look at the at g of x itself and almost read directly off of it what the transformations are. So let me write them down. So the first thing you should be able to see is the 2. The 2 is, since it's outside of the square root, it basically tells you that there's a stretch in the y direction. So the first thing that you should see is a stretch in the y direction, and it's by a factor of 2. Again, I'm just going to write 2 by 2 just to save some space, and that's what we see. And then the second thing that we see, by the way, there are no reflections because I don't see a negative here, and neither do I see a negative inside the square root, so we're all good. So the second thing I see is a translation. So I see a translation by, and I'm simply going to write this as a vector. And if you observe, since this is x plus 3, this must mean it's moved 3 to the left, because this is, again, inside the square root function. So it's going to be negative 3 here. And since it's minus 4, which means it's down 4, it's minus 4. All right? So let's see how we start from here and end up here using these two transformations. All right? So the general rule I just kind of want to mention is that if you're given the simplest parent function, remember the simplest function, and all you can pretty much read off from g of x, or the transform function, and then using these instructions that you've written down, you can basically graph this square root function. So let's do that. So I'm just going to scroll down a bit, and here we are. So if we start with f of x is equal to the square root of x, we know what that looks like. I'm going to graph that here. Right, and here's the yellow. This is the original. This is just simply the original one. I just wanted to demonstrate that. Okay, so we go from here to g of x. I'll stick with yellow. So g of x, and that's equal to 2 square root of x plus 3 minus 4. And at this point, if you're taking notes, I highly suggest you use a pencil, because I'm going to show you step by step how we come across this graph. So let me just draw the axes here in white, okay? And let's start this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, remember, we start with this square root function right here. So this is our start, okay? And the first thing that happens is that there's a stretch in the y direction by 2. So what that means is that this original function, just like this one, will be stretched in the y direction. So what's going to happen is that this will turn to something like this. All right? So in other words, I've sort of ticked this one off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase the last one just to show you how the transformations are happening step by step. So it really just went from that yellow line to this red line because we stretched everything by a factor of 2. Then what happens is that this gets translated to the left by 3. So I'm going to go back to yellow just to show you the transition. So it gets translated to the left by 3. So in other words, it goes like this. And since that was 0, this is negative 3. So I've taken care of this. So it's moved left by 3. And I'm going to erase the old one. So this is why you should be using the pencil, because you should be erasing the last one. And then finally, I'm moving down by 4. So if I'm moving down by 4, then this is simply negative 4. So this is going to go like that. And all that's doing is simply, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this one, this old line, and this is my transform function. So really what's happening, if you observe, is that that's negative 3, So this point has moved to -3, and this point has moved to -4, and that's our transform function. So really, when you think about it, there's been no reflection. That's why it's still sort of going in the same direction. But it's been stretched by 2, so that's why it looks a little bit higher. And then it's moved to the left 3 and down 4. All right, so that's example 1 of how to transform a square root function. I'll show you another example in the next video.